All right, so get ready to see elections like you've never seen them before, because today we're diving deep into the minds of elementary school kids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, those little sages running around with their boundless energy and surprisingly insightful views on, well, just about everything.
Sounds fascinating.
It really is, and we've got a treasure trove of essays and test answers, all thanks to a teacher named Mike Wilson, who's been having his students explore elections for years.
That's fantastic. I always find that children have this uncanny ability to cut through the noise and get to the heart of things. Their perspectives can be so refreshing.
Absolutely, and let me tell you, these kids, they don't hold back.
Oh, I bet.
So buckle up because we're about to uncover some serious wisdom hidden within these hilarious observations.
I'm ready to be schooled by these little ones.
Yeah, me too. All right, let's jump right in with this gem. Universal suffrage means that even the illegible get to vote.
Okay, that's hilarious, but also kind of brilliant in a way.
Right on the surface is pure comedy gold. But when you think about it, it reveals a fundamental truth about democracy. It's about participation. Everyone getting a voice, even if the system itself isn't perfect.
And that's a really important point to remember, especially in today's world where there's so much cynicism and apathy surrounding politics. This kid reminds us that voting is a right, not just a privilege.
Exactly. And they're not afraid to tackle the big questions either.
Oh, like what?
Well, check this out. The difference between a king and a president is that a king is the son of his father, but a president is not.
Wow. Profound in its simplicity.
Right. They've managed to distill a complex concept into a single sentence, highlighting the difference between inherited power and a system where, in theory, anyone can rise to leadership.
It makes you wonder how often we, as adults, take those distinctions for granted.
Totally. And speaking of complex systems, let's talk about the Electoral College because this next quote is a real doozy.
Oh boy, I'm intrigued.
One student, clearly wiser than many adults, wrote, "It is possible to get the majority of electoral votes without getting the majority of popular votes. Anyone who can ever understand how this works gets to be president."
Ouch, that stings a little, but they're not wrong.
Not wrong at all. And it speaks to the confusion and frustration many people feel about the Electoral College even today.
Yeah, it's a system that's been debated for centuries, and this student's observation gets right to the heart of the controversy.
Exactly. They're recognizing that the way we elect our leaders isn't always straightforward, and that there are some inherent paradoxes built into the system.
And that's something that we need to keep talking about because the Electoral College has very real consequences for our democracy.
Absolutely. It's a conversation that's more relevant than ever. And as we'll see throughout this deep dive, these kids aren't afraid to challenge the status quo.
I'm ready for more. And you know what else is interesting about that quote? It highlights how much we focus on the horse race aspect of elections.
Oh, totally. Like who's ahead in the polls, the latest debate drama, all that jazz.
Exactly. And while those things are definitely part of the process, these kids remind us that it's not just about who wins, but also how they win and what they do once they're in office.
It's like they're already thinking about accountability and good governance.
Exactly. And speaking of holding politicians accountable, check out this gem. The campaign is when the candidate tells what he stands for, and the election is when the votes tell if they can stand for his being elected.
Oh, I love that one. It's so simple, yet so profound.
Right. It cuts right to the heart of the matter. They understand that there's a difference between campaigning and governing.
And that sometimes those promises made on the campaign trail don't always translate into action.
Exactly. And they're already recognizing the importance of critical thinking when it comes to political rhetoric.
It's like they're mini fact checkers in the making.
And they're not afraid to call out the absurdity of it all either. Like this observation, elephants and donkeys never fought until politics came along.
Oh man, that's classic. It's amazing how kids can cut through all the noise and point out the obvious.
They have this innate ability to see things for what they are without all the baggage and preconceived notions that we adults carry around.
And that quote really highlights how much symbolism and party allegiance play a role in our political system.
For sure. It makes you wonder when those symbols became more important than the issues themselves.
Right. It's a good reminder to step back every now and then and ask ourselves what we're really fighting for.
Absolutely. And you know what else these kids get? They understand that elections aren't always about choosing the best option, but rather the least worst option.
Oh, yeah, I remember this one. A split ticket is when you don't like any of them on the tickets, you tear it up.
Exactly. It's that feeling of disillusionment that many voters experience when they feel like none of the candidates truly represent them.
And while tearing up a ballot isn't exactly a productive solution, It speaks to a very real frustration with the political process.
For sure. And it's something that we need to address if we want to create a more inclusive and representative democracy.
Absolutely. And you know what else is interesting about these kids? They're not content with just observing the system. They're already thinking about ways to change it.
Oh, I definitely want to hear more about that.
Well, stay tuned, because we're about to dive into some of their more revolutionary ideas in the next part.
I can't wait.
They're not just going to sit back and accept things as they are.
Yeah.
They're already brainstorming solutions.
Well, that's encouraging to hear.
It really is, and it speaks to their idealism and their belief that things can be better.
We could all use a bit of that optimism these days.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes that optimism comes with a healthy dose of humor.
Oh, I'm all for that.
Like, check this one out. Once he is elected, sometimes the president has to work 24 hours a day until he finds out what he is supposed to do.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious, but also kind of true.
Right. It highlights the enormity of the job and maybe the unrealistic expectations we place on our leaders.
And the fact that even presidents have to learn on the job.
Exactly. They're not all-knowing superheroes, despite what some people might think.
More like ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances.
That's a good way to put it. And maybe some of these kids with their fresh perspectives and willingness to question everything will be the ones to redefine what it means to be president.
I wouldn't be surprised they're already on the right track.
They really are. And this next quote kind of sums up the bittersweet reality of elections.
Let's hear it.
Campaigns give us a great deal of happiness by their finally ending.
Oh, I felt that in my soul.
Right. It's a sentiment I think we can all relate to, no matter who we voted for.
It's a good reminder that elections are just one small part of the democratic process.
Exactly. The real work begins after the votes are counted.
When we come together to address the challenges facing our communities and our nation.
And that requires all of us to stay engaged, informed, and willing to listen to different perspectives.
Couldn't agree more.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the minds of future voters, I got to say I'm feeling hopeful.
Me too.
These kids remind us that even in a system as complex and often frustrating as politics, there's always room for hope, for humor, and for fresh perspectives.
They give us a glimpse into the future of democracy, and it's looking brighter already.
So the next time you're feeling overwhelmed by the political landscape, take a page from these kids' books, ask the tough questions, don't be afraid to laugh, and never underestimate the power of a fresh perspective.
Well said.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive. But the conversation doesn't have to end here. Head over to our website or social media and tell us what resonated with you most from today's episode. And hey, maybe even share some of your own kid-inspired wisdom. We'd love to hear from you.
Until next time,